us go ahead and talk about collection of the data set. Data can be collected in various methods, various sampling techniques. But for now, today, I just want to focus on few of the important techniques that are given in any statistical books. Okay. So the first technique that you have is called simple random sampling. Beta, what is simple random sampling? The word, focus on the word. Random sampling. Matlab, I am randomly creating samples. In this, what you do is, take an example. Just for example, I have a population of 1,000 students. And I want to go ahead and I want to create a sample of 100 students. What will I do? I can go ahead and I can give number to each student. So I can say, okay, this is number 1, number 2, number 3. I've allotted number to each of them. And now what I can do is I can just go ahead, I can start a lottery system. So I will put all these numbers in a box, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then I will go ahead and I will pick up 100 chits from this box. So suppose the first chit that comes is number 5. Okay, select that person. The second chit that comes is number 8. Select that person. So whatever number will come in your chit, you will go ahead and you will select that person. And you will do this 100 times so that 100 people are selected, right? So when we come to the simple random sampling, as the word suggests, you just have to go ahead and you have to randomly select. But random karne ke liye, how do you randomize? To randomize, you can go ahead and you can do this chit method. There is another thing which you can do. Okay, beta. The definition of analytical study. This is the definition. It focuses on improvement of the process. Let me know once you have written. Done. Fine. Now just think about it. So, beta, when we talk about simple random sampling, I'm just going ahead and collecting the data randomly. Now here, there is something which is known as random number generator table. Just Google it once, you will get this table. Isme kya hota hai na? Randomly, they will give you some numbers. 4, 2085, 45. ऐसे कुछ random numbers होंगे. You want 100, just keep picking from here. So I will pick number 4. I just want 100. But I want out of 1,000. So 1,000 mein 2085 to exist nahi karega. Then pick up 45. Then pick up next and so on. So you just pick up these numbers which are given in this random generator table. And in that you have done random picking, right? Now, because you are randomly picking up the samples, this is an ideal example of what is called as probability sampling. So I can divide my sampling in 2 parts. One is called probability sampling and the other is called non-probability sampling. Probability sampling means it is by the basis of probability. That means by random selection. And non-probability sampling means it is based on your convenience or non-random selection. Right? Just for example, ये बहुत easy होता है. So a lot of times when I was involved with my students in this research work, and I would ask them to go ahead and collect the data, they would just go ahead and create a Google form and spread it among their own relatives. But when you spread it within your own relatives, then it is a non-probability sampling. You are doing it on the basis of your convenience, right? You are not going ahead and you're not creating any probability per se, right? Probability tab hogi jab bahut log honge. So when you go ahead and you get the analysis that 50% of the people watch TV or 60% have TV at their home, and you're just collecting it from your own relative, that is clearly a non-probability sampling. So within this probability sampling, where you are collecting randomly, there the first method that you have, that is called as simple random sampling. और ये simple random sampling है जो हमने अभी पढ़ा कि just number people and एक lottery system से randomly draw people, that is simple random sampling. The second sampling that you have, beta, that is called as systematic sampling. Systematic sampling. ठीक है? Systematic sampling क्या बोलते हैं? It is similar to simple random sampling, but it is usually slightly easier to conduct. ठीक है? Every member of the population is listed with a number. But instead of randomly going ahead and generating numbers, you choose them at regular intervals. Let me give you an example. Just say, I go to a village. And यहाँ पे ना in village के house numbers लिखे हुए हैं. House number 101, 102, 103, 104 and so on. And I go ahead and I say कि ये बहुत सारे घर हैं. Maybe there are 1,000 houses. And I want to collect 100 houses. Systematic मतलब अभी भी random ही है क्योंकि मुझे नहीं पता किस घर में कौन है. But I am systematically collecting the sample. So I collect house number 101. Then I leave 2 houses. Then I collect house number 104. Then I leave 2 houses. Then I collect house number 10567 and so on. So I am following a system. That means I am collecting at regular interval, but it is still random in nature because I don't know which house has which person in it. So here the sample is collected at regular intervals. Okay, beta. Now, a lot of times HRs will use this. Okay, they will just alphabetically put people in their organization, and then they will pick up the first person, then 10th, then 20th, and so on. The third type of sampling, that is called stratified sampling. Stratified, in systematic sampling, AP or GP can be used. Yes, beta, you can use AP, you can use GP, you can use any technique as long as you follow that technique thoroughly. So कुछ भी create कर लो. ठीक है, जैसे for example, I can just say that I will pick every odd person. That's also a way that I have created. ठीक है, you just have to create a system here. Now let's talk about stratified sampling. So stratified comes from the word called as strata. Okay. And strata means, in a way, actually it comes from spectrum. It comes from different groups. This is, for example, just think about it. Let's say the government wants to go ahead and it wants to understand how its policies are working. Okay. And the policy that the government created is education for all. Now the government goes to all people who are above poverty line, who are able to afford their own education, and ask them, how do you feel about my policy? It will be a biased result. Of course, they have got nothing to do with the policy. They will be indifferent. They will simply say, okay, fine, it's a good policy. Unless you don't go to the right people you will not be able to make the right conclusions. So when I talk about stratified sampling, I want that whenever I go ahead and I create my conclusions, it should be representative of all the sectors of the population. Just for example, I should be able to represent all the genders, all the race, all the religions. So I can create strata on the basis of any of these. So I can create categories that, okay, there are some people representing the first strata, first religion, some people representing the second religion, some people representing the third religion, so that I have information from all religions. Okay. So what you do, अभी भी मैं randomly pick करूंगी हर religion के अंदर से लोगों को, but पहले मैं religion के basis पे लोगों को divide करूंगी ताकि हर religion मेरे sample के अंदर represent हो पाए. So I have a population. First, this population will be divided into subgroup. This subgroup is called as strata, right? This can be based on any characteristic. जैसे वो characteristic gender, identity, age, income bracket, religion, region, job role, किसी भी basis पे मैं ये stratas create कर रही हूँ. And then each strata से I will randomly pick people. So randomness is still involved, but now I have ensured that my population has each strata being represented. This is very important in gender bias studies. Just for example, let's say I have 800 males in the organization and only 200 females. Now I want to ask, how do you feel about equality? I pick up 100 people randomly, जैसे. तो बेटा अगर मैं डायरेक्टली 100 रैंडमली पिक करूंगी, बहुत हाई चांस है कि इस 100 में शायद 80% मेल ही आएंगे, क्योंकि आउट ऑफ 1000 चिट्स दैट आई विल क्रिएट 800 तो मेल्स की हैं. सो व्हेन आई पिक अप चिट्स, देयर विल बी ऑलमोस्ट 80% मेल्स इन माय सैंपल आल्सो. Males may say that they feel gender equality when females may say they don't, or vice versa. We don't know, right? So I want that even sample, both should be represented well. So what will I do? I will create strata. And I will say, okay, 50% of my sample should be from males. Ab randomly koi bhi male pick kar lo inme se. And 50% from females, randomly koi bhi female pick kar lo. So what I am doing here is that I am representing the strata first and then I am randomly selecting. The fourth one and the last one that I have, that is called as cluster sampling. But a cluster sampling is also very similar. Most students get confused between cluster and strata. So cluster sampling also divides population in subgroup, but each subgroup should have similar characteristics to the whole sample. That means instead of sampling individual from each subgroup, you are randomly selecting the entire subgroup only. Let me give you an example. Just say, let's say, so एक बारी पहले लिख लो, you are randomly selecting subgroup itself. Now let me give you an example. Just say, for example, a company has, let's say, 10 offices across cities. Okay. Or let's say, let's not make 10 offices. Let's say it has offices across 10 cities. Okay. हर ऑफिस में roughly same number of employees हैं. Now, you don't have the capability to travel to each of the office to collect your data. So what will you do? You will go ahead and you will randomly select any 3 offices and you will collect data from these offices. ठीक है. तो अब मैंने क्लस्टर क्रिएट किया है. मेरा क्लस्टर क्या है? ऑफिस 1 के जितने एम्प्लॉयज हैं वो ऑटोमेटिकली क्लस्टर 1 बन गए. ऑफिस 2 के जितने एम्प्लॉयज हैं वो ऑटोमेटिकली क्लस्टर 2 बन गए, ये सिटी 1 में है, ये सिटी 2 में है, ये सिटी 3 में है। और अब इन 10 क्लस्टर्स में से मैं रैंडमली 3 क्लस्टर्स को पिक कर रही हूँ. सो आई पिक अप क्लस्टर 1, cluster maybe 10, cluster 5. I randomly pick up 3 clusters. So here I am randomizing on the cluster itself. पूरे का पूरा ऑफिस मेरा एक क्लस्टर था, मैंने पूरा का पूरा एक रैंडम ऑफिस उठाया. यहां पे I was not doing that. Here I was creating 2 stratas और उनके अंदर से मैं लोगों को रैंडमली पिक कर रही थी. यहां पे I'm not randomly picking up people from office. No. I am randomly picking up office itself. So I am saying कि ये सब offices बहुत similar हैं, क्योंकि ये सारे मेरे ही offices हैं. इनमें मैंने एकदम सेम तरीके के लोग रखे हैं, सेम जॉब प्रोफाइल के. सारे offices में भी marketing के offices हैं. Now I want to see how these offices are working. So I pick up any 3 random offices. So clustering, sampling randomly picks up a cluster. But strata sampling first creates strata and randomly picks up people from that strata. I hope you are able to understand the difference between the two. Okay, so this is very important from exam point of view to understand all 4 types of clustering in probabilistic clustering. Now, so today I'm going to go ahead and begin with the non-probabilistic aspect of sampling. So what did I say? What is non-probability aspect? Non-probability aspect basically says that you go ahead and you do things at your convenience, right? So basically what it is doing ahead and saying is that you do not go ahead and don't choose randomly. You follow non-randomness. ठीक है जी? So we want to understand what those non-random types can be. So please write down today's title, non-probability sampling. Yes, beta. So cluster sampling mein we were saying that we are going to randomize the clusters. Iska kya matlab hai randomizing the clusters? It means that I am not randomly choosing individuals. I am randomly choosing a group. So imagine this. Suppose in your, let's say in your college, economic honor students, there are, let's say, 5 sections. All these 5 sections are alike. It's just that you have 5 sections because, the teacher ratio has to be maintained. All these students have scored the same marks, cut off same से admission हुआ है, so they're very similar in nature. इनको जो subjects offer हो रहे हैं वो भी same है, everything is the same. So I have section A, B, C, D, and E. Now I want to study how these students are performing, right? And whether they are happy with the teaching methods or not. But I find it very difficult to go ahead and to, ask all these 5 sections, every student, how their performance has been and whether they're happy with teaching or not. So what I do is, out of these 5 sections, I randomly pick 2 sections, randomly. That is cluster sampling. So each section is a cluster. They have similar properties, that they have the same kind of students. But because dealing with entire population is difficult, dealing with all students of all 5 sections is difficult, I go ahead and I choose any 2 clusters randomly and I talk to them. That is cluster sampling. You are randomly choosing 2 clusters. Is that clear now? Should I move on to non-probability now? Okay. So we choose all students of 2 sections. Yes, you're right. Here randomization is on the cluster, not on the students. Correct. Okay. So now I will go ahead and I will start with the second lecture, and that is going to be non-probability sampling. And in this, the first one that I'm going to go ahead and take will be convenience sampling. सबसे easy word ही suggest कर रहा है what it is. So when I talk about convenience sampling, what does it mean? Convenience means you are choosing at your convenience. Mane, like for example, I gave you an example yesterday also. When I want to do a research and I directly go to my relatives and I ask them, please fill this Google form for me. And I just use that to do the analysis. It is at my convenience. Or let's say that, I want to understand the behavior of people shopping, right? I go to my nearest mall and I just go ahead and from there, I look at the behavior, right? I just ask people to fill the form. Then I'm just going to my nearest mall now. I am not going to any other mall. I am not going to any other place. So when you go ahead and when you have taken your convenience in doing the sampling, you have considered your ease in carrying out the sampling, that is called convenience sampling. Why is it called convenience? Because the researcher is considering his or her ease while getting in touch with the subjects, right? So we can go ahead and say that this is at the ease of the researcher, right? And he gets in touch with the subjects at his convenience. And you can just quote an example like going to the mall. I have seen many people doing this. Many of my contacts on LinkedIn, they just post their Google form on LinkedIn and ask people to fill it. But that is at convenience, right? So convenience sampling is done at your ease. Now the second one is called judgmental sampling, and it is also known as purposive sampling. When I talk about, देखो word से ही हमेशा याद रखनी है चीजें. So judgmental comes from the word judgment. Purposive comes from the word purpose. मतलब क्या? मतलब you are going ahead and you are doing sampling at your discretion. जैसे for example, let's say that I want to understand how how many people out of economic honors will go for a master's degree and how many people will go for a job. I am interested in only those students who want to go for a master's degree. What will I do? I will go ahead and I will put one basic question first, that are you interested in studying masters? Bas itna question पूछ लो. People who say no, automatically I will eliminate them from my sample. क्योंकि मेरे को उनको पढ़ना ही नहीं है. I am only interested in understanding the behavior of people who want to go ahead and who want to do masters. Otherwise, I'm not interested. So this itself becomes judgment. This itself becomes my purpose. My purpose is to look for people who want to do masters. So I eliminate the people who don't want to do masters out of my sample, right? So we can say that in this case, you are forming the sample at your discretion. Same, just I want to study how people survive who are below the poverty line. So I ask the income level of people. Now, people whose income is below poverty line, I will keep them. But whose income is above poverty line, I will eliminate them. That will not be part of my sample. So when I have a purpose in mind and I create a sample according to the purpose, that is called purposive sampling. Now come to the third one, beta. So this is snowball sampling. Okay, now snowball sampling is basically when your subjects are difficult to trace. ठीक है जी, take an example. Suppose, let's take the previous example only first. Let's say I wanted to study people who are below poverty line. Now, there may be people who do not want to go ahead and disclose their income. So even though they will be below poverty line, but because they did not disclose their income, I would be having only a sample of people who disclosed their income. Okay. So which means that my subjects are difficult to trace. My sample will, यहाँ पे randomization नहीं हो पा रही, because जो लोग बता ही नहीं रहे कि उनकी सैलरी कितनी है, उनको मैं अपने सैंपल में randomly include नहीं कर पा रही. I am not able to include them in my sample. So when I talk about snowball sampling, it is when your subjects are difficult to trace. Let us take one more example. Let's say research on HIV/AIDS. Not all people who have this will tell whether they have this disease or not, right? I will have some volunteers telling that, you know, these are the symptoms, this is how it happens, etc. Right? So only people who volunteer to be part of my research can be included in the sample. Because not all people are part of my sample, only volunteers are part of my sample, automatically randomization cannot take place, and therefore it is called snowball sampling. So you can keep writing some examples here, beta. So this can be when people don't disclose their income. So only volunteers are part of sample. Now come to the last one, fourth one. This is called as quota sampling. Now, many students in exam, they will get confused between quota sampling and between cluster and stratified. ये तीनों बहुत similar लगते हैं. तो पहले तो you should be very clear that quota sampling is non-probabilistic. मतलब किसी तरीके से मैं randomization नहीं कर रही हूँ. Whereas stratified and cluster are probabilistic, which means I was doing randomization in some way. Now just think about it. Quota sampling is when you have some group in mind. मतलब एक strata type ही बना रहे हो, एक group के साथ ही deal कर रहे हो, but you're not randomizing, right? So for example, I have a group in mind that I want to understand how many people between the age of 15 to 20 smoke. So I have a particular group that I want to deal with. And that is the age group of 15 to 20 plus they should be smoking. I have a quota in mind. Quota means I have a particular group in mind and I just want to take sample of those group, only those people, right? So when you do sampling on preset standard, that means you do sampling only on what you have in mind. Like for example, 15 to 20 age group of people who smoke. I have a particular subgroup in mind, na? Then that becomes quota sampling. Again, I am not doing randomization here. That is why it is non-probabilistic in nature. So I hope this is clear to you. This can come as MCQ questions very well, beta. You should be aware of probabilistic and non-probabilistic sampling methods. And उसके अंदर चारों methods जानने बहुत ही जरूरी है. Now,